For 12 solitary years, Elias Thorne had watched the sunset over his sprawling Wyoming ranch, each day mirroring the last in its quiet, unbroken rhythm. He was a man carved from the land itself, weathered by wind and time, his hands calloused from honest work, his eyes holding the distant gaze of someone long accustomed to their own company. His world was vast, empty save for the cattle, the creaking windmill, and the echoes of a life he'd chosen, or perhaps that had chosen him. He'd found a certain peace in that isolation, a stark beauty in the endless plains that stretched to the horizon. The silence was his constant companion, a presence as tangible as the dust that coated everything, a quiet hum that had settled deep into his bones. He knew the land intimately, every gully, every rise, every secret spring, and it knew him. This reciprocal understanding formed the bedrock of his existence, a quiet covenant between man and earth. Yet, a profound emptiness resided within him, a silent ache no amount of solitude could truly fill. Elias knew, deep down, that his life was missing something vital, a warmth he hadn't felt since his youth. He longed for connection, for laughter that wasn't his own, for the simple chaos of a shared existence. The vastness of his ranch, once a source of comfort, sometimes felt like an oppressive weight, a constant reminder of what was absent. He yearned for a family, a true home, but the ranch, his legacy, seemed destined to remain a monument to his loneliness. He was, by all accounts, a good man, hardworking and honorable, but entirely alone. His days were a precise choreography of chores, each movement purposeful, each task completed with quiet efficiency. He rode his horse, mended fences, tended to his herd, all under the immense, indifferent sky. Evenings were spent by the crackling fire, a book in hand, the only sound the wind whistling through the eaves. This was his life, meticulously crafted, yet fundamentally incomplete. His isolation wasn't born of bitterness, but of a deep-seated need for peace. Years ago, the bustling world had felt too loud, too demanding, after he'd lost his wife and young son in a tragic accident. The memories, though softened by time, still held a sharp edge, a reminder of the fragility of happiness. The ranch, inherited from his grandfather, offered a balm for his wounded spirit, a place where he could heal at his own pace, surrounded by the honest work of the land. He found a quiet comfort in the predictability of his routine, the simple satisfaction of a hard day's labor. The physical demands of ranching offered a welcome distraction, a way to channel his grief into tangible effort. He had built his life around this solitude, convinced it was the only way to protect what little remained of his heart. He had armored himself against further pain, believing that by keeping the world at bay, he could prevent any more loss. Beneath the hardened exterior, a flicker of something still remained, a longing he rarely acknowledged, even to himself. It was a yearning for connection, for the warmth of family, a life he thought he had forever forfeited. He saw it in the spring calves nuzzling their mothers, a tender scene that would sometimes catch him off guard. He saw it in the occasional family passing by on the distant highway, their laughter echoing faintly on the wind, a sound that carried a bittersweet melody across the vast expanse. He would quickly push these thoughts away, reminding himself of the peace he had found, the quiet contentment of his chosen path. He would tell himself that this was enough, that he had all he needed, even as a quiet voice deep within him whispered otherwise. The longing was a persistent ember, glowing faintly beneath the ashes of his self-imposed peace. The central conflict of Elias's world wasn't a raging storm or a cattle rustler. It was the quiet battle within himself, the struggle between the comfort of his solitude and the undeniable, lingering ache for something more. He had perfected the art of being alone, yet a part of him wondered if he was truly living, or merely existing. He had become a master of self-sufficiency, capable of handling any challenge the land threw at him, but utterly unprepared for the challenges of the heart. He never imagined that a simple, routine trip to the Harmony Creek auction, a trip he'd made countless times before, would shatter the careful equilibrium he had so meticulously built, forcing him to confront the very longings he had so diligently buried. He was about to discover that sometimes, The greatest changes come not from grand designs, but from the most unexpected of mistakes. The universe, it seemed, had a peculiar sense of humor and a powerful way of delivering what a man truly needed, even if he didn't know how to ask for it. The turning point arrived not with a dramatic flourish, but with the mundane thud of an auction catalog landing on his porch. Elias, in his customary meticulous way, had intended to bid on a prize bull, a magnificent Hereford he'd been tracking for months. He'd studied the lot numbers, memorized the details, and prepared his strategy down to the last dollar. He was a man who left nothing to chance, especially when it came to his livelihood. His ranch relied on careful planning and shrewd decisions, and the acquisition of new livestock was always a significant event, approached with the gravity it deserved. He had a specific vision for his herd, and this bull was a key piece of that puzzle. The auction house in Harmony Creek, usually a predictable affair of dusty heirlooms and farm equipment, held a peculiar draw for Elias that crisp autumn morning. He hadn't intended to buy anything substantial, merely to observe, perhaps find a new saddle blanket or a sturdy set of tools. Yet, as the auctioneer's rapid-fire cadence filled the room, a large, ornate wooden crate caught Elias's eye. It stood apart from the usual offerings, shrouded in a canvas tarp, hinting at something substantial, something unusual. Its very presence seemed to him, with an unspoken story, an anomaly in the otherwise familiar landscape of agricultural trade. A strange sense of curiosity, a feeling Elias rarely indulged, pricked at him. He usually dismissed such whims, adhering strictly to his practical nature. But something about this crate held his gaze, a magnetic pull he couldn't quite explain. He listened as the bidding began, a low rumble of hesitant offers. The auctioneer, a wiry man named Jedediah, who knew everyone's business, rattled off details about the crate's contents, something about a collection of antique dolls and miscellaneous household items. Elias, usually meticulous in his purchases, found himself inexplicably drawn to the mystery. He wasn't a collector of curiosities, nor did he have any use for antique dolls, yet the unknown held a strange allure. He raised his hand, a small, almost imperceptible gesture, and to his surprise, the bidding stopped. No one else seemed interested in the enigmatic crate. The hammer fell with a decisive thud. The crate was his. A small part of him, the logical, pragmatic part, immediately questioned his impulse, but the die was cast. A wave of mild confusion, followed by a familiar pang of regret, washed over Elias. He had bought something sight unseen, a foolish impulse. This was not like him. He paid Jedediah, the auctioneer's knowing grin doing little to ease Elias's sudden unease. He loaded the cumbersome crate onto his flatbed truck, the weight of it a physical manifestation of his unexpected folly. The drive back to the Double T felt longer than usual, the crate a silent, imposing presence behind him. The sun was dipping below the western horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, as Elias pulled into his driveway. He backed the truck up to the barn, the crate a silent, imposing presence in the fading light. He knew he couldn't leave it there indefinitely, but for now, he simply wanted to postpone the inevitable unveiling of his mistake. He spent the next morning tending to his usual chores, putting off the inevitable unveiling of his impulsive purchase. He fed the horses, checked on the cattle, repaired a loose fence post, anything to delay confronting the contents of the crate. It sat in the barn, a silent challenge to Elias's ordered world, a dark, rectangular enigma. He worked with a deliberate slowness, his mind replaying the auction, the strange pull he'd felt the moment he'd raised his hand. Why had he done it? What possessed him to act so out of character? Finally, as the afternoon shadows lengthened, stretching long and thin across the barn floor, Elias grabbed a crowbar. He approached the crate with a mixture of dread and grudging curiosity. He pried open the lid, expecting to see dusty dolls, perhaps some old porcelain figurines, a collection of forgotten trinkets that would confirm his foolishness. What he saw made him drop the crowbar with a clang that echoed through the quiet barn, a sound that reverberated with the shock of discovery. Inside the crate, nestled amongst blankets and what looked like a few worn toys, were not dolls, but 5 pairs of wide, startled eyes. A small hand, no bigger than a sparrow's wing, reached out, clutching a tattered teddy bear. A collective gasp, tiny and fragile, filled the air, a sound so unexpected it stole Elias's breath. Elias, a man accustomed to the solitude of his ranch, accustomed to the lowing of cattle and the sigh of the wind, stared in stunned silence. His mind struggled to process the impossible reality before him. He had bought children. 5 of them. His auction mistake had not just brought him a crate, it had brought him a family. The quiet fortress of the Double T suddenly felt very small, and Elias's meticulously built equilibrium shattered into 1,000 pieces, scattering like dust in the wind. His world, once so predictable, had been irrevocably altered in a single, impossible moment. The silence in Elias's living room, usually a comfort, now felt like a suffocating blanket. 5 pairs of eyes, wide and unblinking, stared back at him. They were small, no older than 10, perhaps even younger for the littlest one, a girl with braided pigtails clutching a tattered doll. Their faces were smudged with dirt, their clothes worn and patched, but their gaze held an unnerving intensity. Elias, a man accustomed to the solitude of his own thoughts, found himself utterly speechless. He had purchased a crate, a simple wooden crate, and somehow, through a twist of fate only the universe could conjure, it had contained not tools or supplies, but children. The auctioneer's hurried words about contents unknown echoed in his ears, a cruel joke played by destiny, a cosmic prank that had landed 5 innocent souls on his doorstep. He cleared his throat, the sound rough and unused, a rusty hinge in his throat. "Well," he began, his voice a low rumble, entirely inadequate for the moment. "I suppose you're hungry." It was a foolish question, an inadequate response to the seismic shift that had just occurred in his life. The eldest, a boy with serious eyes and dirt smudges on his cheek, nodded slowly, a flicker of hope in his gaze. The others, like a flock of startled birds, mirrored his movement, their small heads bobbing in unison. Elias felt a pang of something unfamiliar, a mix of responsibility and profound bewilderment. His carefully constructed world, designed for one, had just been invaded by 5. The quiet order of his life had been irrevocably disrupted, replaced by an unforeseen, overwhelming presence. He led them to the kitchen, a room that rarely saw more than his own solitary meal. The aroma of strong coffee still lingered, a ghost of his morning routine, a scent of a life that felt suddenly distant. He started a fire in the old wood-burning stove, the familiar ritual a small anchor in the swirling chaos of his mind. The crackle of the wood, the rising warmth provided a momentary solace. While he brewed a fresh pot and rummaged for the dry jerky and hardtack he kept for emergencies, the children sat at his large, rough-hewn table, their silence more unnerving than any noise could have been. They sat stiffly, their small hands clasped in their laps, their eyes darting around the unfamiliar room, taking in every detail. Elias watched them from the corner of his eye, trying to decipher their story, their names, anything that might give him a clue as to how to navigate this impossible situation. He felt a profound inadequacy, a rancher accustomed to animals, not children. He offered them food, and they ate with a quiet desperation that tugged at something deep within Elias. Their hunger was not just for food, but for safety, for stability. He saw the way the youngest girl carefully wrapped a piece of jerky in her napkin, saving it for later, a testament to past scarcity. He saw the boy, the eldest, share his portion with the one next to him, a silent act of protection, a quiet display of innate kindness. These were not just children. They were survivors, small echoes of the very resiliency Elias himself had cultivated over years of hardship. The thought was both unsettling and strangely familiar, a mirror reflecting a part of himself he rarely acknowledged. Their quiet strength resonated with his own, forging an unexpected, unspoken bond. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the vast Montana sky in hues of orange and purple, Elias knew he couldn't simply send them away. Not tonight. Not ever, perhaps. The Double T, once his quiet fortress, now hummed with an unfamiliar energy, a quiet vibrancy. He looked at the 5 small figures, their faces illuminated by the flickering lamplight, their eyes no longer startled, but filled with a fragile trust. The weight of his auction mistake settled upon him with a new, profound understanding. This wasn't just a crate. It was a responsibility, a challenge that would demand more from Elias than any fence mending or cattle drive ever could. His solitary life was over. The question was, what kind of life would begin now? What new path would this unexpected twist of fate forge for him and for them? The next morning, Elias awoke to a cacophony of unfamiliar sounds, the soft murmur of children's voices, the creak of floorboards above him, a small, tentative cough. He rose, the weight of the previous day's events settling heavily upon him, yet mixed with a strange, burgeoning sense of purpose. He found them huddled in the living room, still wary, but no longer completely terrified, their initial shock having given way to a cautious curiosity. The eldest boy, who introduced himself as Thomas, spoke for them all, his voice raspy but clear, carrying the burden of their shared history. He explained their story, a tale of hardship and loss, of parents lost to illness, of a desperate journey seeking refuge, ending, improbably, in Elias's auction crate. Their journey had been long and perilous, a testament to their enduring spirit. The youngest, a girl named Lily, clutched her worn teddy bear, her eyes wide and trusting, a beacon of innocence amidst their sorrow. The other 2, a quiet girl named Clara and a mischievous boy named Ben, listened intently, their expressions a mixture of relief and apprehension. Elias, a man who had rarely spoken more than a few sentences a day, found himself listening, truly listening, for the first time in years. Their vulnerability chipped away at his carefully constructed walls, dismantling the defenses he had built around his heart. He saw not just a burden, but a chance, a glimmer of the family he had so long yearned for, a second chance at a life he thought was forever lost. He couldn't send them away, not now that he knew their story, not now that he had seen their resilience and their quiet hope. He would provide for them, protect them. It was a daunting prospect, a responsibility he had never imagined, but the solitude that had once been his comfort now felt like a burden he was ready to shed, a heavy cloak he no longer wished to wear. Days turned into weeks, and the Double T slowly transformed. The quiet ranch, once a monument to Elias's loneliness, began to hum with life, a vibrant symphony of new sounds and activities. Elias, the stoic rancher, found himself learning new rhythms, adapting to a world suddenly filled with small, demanding presences. He learned to cook for 6, his meals evolving from simple bachelor fare to hearty, comforting dishes. He learned to navigate the complexities of childhood emotions, to soothe scraped knees and mend bruised feelings. He learned to tell stories that captivated young minds, spinning tales of cowboys and wild horses under the vast Wyoming sky. Thomas, the eldest, quickly became his shadow, eager to learn every aspect of ranch life. He showed a natural aptitude for animals, a quiet strength that reminded Elias of himself, a reflection of his own youthful determination. Clara, gentle and observant, found solace in the ranch's vastness, often sketching the landscape in a worn notebook, capturing the beauty of their new home. Ben, full of boundless energy, brought up playful chaos that Elias secretly cherished, his boisterous laughter echoing through the once silent halls. And little Lily, with her infectious giggles and spontaneous hugs, melted Elias's heart with every embrace, her innocent affection a powerful balm to his long-guarded spirit. The children, initially wary, slowly blossomed under Elias's quiet care. They brought laughter, questions, and a vibrant energy that filled the empty spaces of the old farmhouse. Elias found himself smiling more, talking more, even singing old cowboy tunes as he milked the cows, his voice, once rough, now carrying a surprising warmth. He taught them about the land, about resilience, about the honest work that sustained them, sharing the wisdom he had gleaned from years on the plains. In turn, they taught him about joy, about connection, about the simple beauty of shared moments, reminding him of the simple pleasures he had long forgotten. The ranch was no longer just his. It was theirs, a home built on an unexpected foundation of compassion and shared experience. One blustery afternoon, A dust-covered wagon pulled up to the ranch, stirring up a cloud of ochre earth. A woman stepped down, her face etched with worry, her eyes scanning the yard with an intensity that spoke of desperate searching. It was Sarah, Thomas, Clara, Ben, and Lily's aunt, who had been desperately searching for them since they'd gone missing from a distant relative's care. Her relief, when she saw her nieces and nephews safe and healthy, was palpable, a wave of emotion that washed over her, bringing tears to her eyes. Elias, for the first time in weeks, felt a pang of fear, a familiar tightening in his chest. He knew this day would come, the day he would have to give them up, to return them to their rightful family. The thought was a cold dread, a stark reminder of the impermanence of his newfound happiness. Sarah was a kind woman, with a quiet strength that matched Elias's own, a resilience forged in her own trials. She listened intently as he explained how the children had come to be with him, the strange twist of fate at the auction, the impossible circumstances that had brought them together. She saw the genuine care in his eyes, the deep bond he had formed with her family, a connection that transcended the brief time they had known each other. As days turned into a week, Sarah stayed on the ranch, helping with chores, observing the children, and slowly, gently getting to know Elias. She saw the transformation in him, the way his eyes, once distant and guarded, now held a warmth he couldn't hide, a profound tenderness. She saw the children's profound love for him, a love that had taken root in the most unlikely of circumstances, a testament to the power of unexpected kindness. One evening, as the sun dipped below the western horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Elias sat on the porch swing, the familiar creak a comforting sound. Sarah sat beside him, the children playing quietly nearby, their voices a soft, happy hum. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding, a connection growing between two souls who had both known loneliness. Sarah turned to him, her gaze soft but direct, her voice gentle yet firm. "Elias," she began, "I've seen how happy they are here, how much they love you, and I've seen how much you've changed, how this place has become a true home for them and for you." She paused, then took a deep breath, her decision clear. "I don't have much to offer them right now, not a home like this, not the stability and love they've found here. But I could stay. We could build something here, together." Elias's heart pounded in his chest, a drumbeat of hope and disbelief. It was a proposition he hadn't dared to dream of, a second chance at the family he had lost, the connection he had yearned for, a future he had never allowed himself to imagine. He looked at the children, then at Sarah, her face illuminated by the fading light, her eyes holding a quiet promise. The fear of loss, which had been his constant companion, now seemed a distant shadow, replaced by the profound joy of shared moments, of a future filled with laughter and love. He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gently enclosing hers, a silent affirmation of their shared destiny. "Sarah," he said, his voice rough with emotion, thick with unshed tears, "there's enough room here for all of us. Always." The words, simple yet profound, sealed their new beginning. The golden light of the setting sun painted the ranch in hues of amber and rose, a stark contrast to the stark solitude Elias had once known. 12 years of quiet evenings, punctuated only by the wind's whisper, had given way to the joyful chaos of a bustling home. The laughter of children, the gentle murmur of adult conversation, the clatter of supper dishes, these were the new melodies that filled his once empty walls, a vibrant symphony of life. The scent of Sarah's baking often wafted through the air, mingling with the earthy smell of hay and fresh-turned soil, creating a comforting aroma that permeated every corner of the farmhouse. The central conflict, the one that had held him captive in a self-imposed exile, had slowly, almost imperceptibly, dissolved. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation, but a gradual softening of his hardened heart, a reawakening of the man he'd forgotten he could be. The auction mistake, that seemingly random twist of fate, had not just brought a family to his doorstep, it had brought life back to Elias, a vibrancy he hadn't felt since his youth. He found himself rediscovering simple pleasures, the joy of a shared meal, the warmth of a child's hand in his, the quiet comfort of Sarah's presence beside him. He learned to embrace the unpredictable, to find beauty in the messy, wonderful chaos of family life. He watched Sarah, her hands flour dusted from baking, gently guide Lily through her evening prayers, her voice soft and melodic. Her presence, steady and warm, had become as essential as the sunrise, as comforting as the familiar scent of the prairie after a rain. He had learned to trust again, to open himself to the unpredictable beauty of human connection, to shed the protective shell he had worn for so long. The fear of loss, which had been his constant companion, now seemed a distant shadow, replaced by the profound joy of shared moments, of building something new and lasting. He understood now that true strength lay not in isolation, but in vulnerability, in the courage to love and be loved. His journey from a man defined by his past to one embracing his future was evident in every unhurried step he took, every genuine smile he offered. He no longer saw the ranch as merely land to be worked, a solitary domain, but as a home, a sanctuary built not just of wood and stone, but of love and laughter, of shared dreams and whispered secrets. The children, initially wary, now clamored for his stories, their bright eyes reflecting the warmth he now carried, their trust a precious gift. He had learned patience, compassion, and the quiet strength of vulnerability, lessons far more valuable than any he had learned from the land alone. He taught them to ride, to care for the animals, to appreciate the vast beauty of their surroundings, instilling in them a love for the land that mirrored his own. The consequences of his initial action, bidding on a seemingly innocuous lot, had rippled outwards, transforming not just his life but the lives of 5 others, weaving their destinies together in an intricate, beautiful tapestry. The loneliness that had defined him was gone, replaced by a profound sense of belonging, a deep-seated peace that settled into his very soul. The ranch, once a monument to his isolation, now stood as a testament to the unexpected ways life can deliver its greatest gifts, proving that sometimes the most profound blessings arrive in the most unassuming packages. As the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, Elias felt a peace he hadn't known in years, a contentment that radiated from deep within. He was no longer just a rancher. He was a father, a husband, a man finally home, his heart, once a walled fortress, now open, warmed by the presence of his new family and the promise of a future he had once thought impossible. The double T, once a symbol of his solitude, had become a vibrant testament to love, resilience, and the extraordinary power of an ordinary mistake.